Hey, what's up? Chili is one of those things that everybody's got a secret move for. When you ask them about it, they're like, I make a mean chili. And yes, I'm sure that you do. But today, we're talking about my chili. I'm gonna show you how to make the best chili I know how. And yeah, it's gonna be pretty mean. So to get started, I'm gonna cook some beans. This is 300 grams of pinto beans that I've soaked overnight in about 1 kilo of water. I've drained them, rinsed them, and then I replaced that kilo of water with a fresh one. I'm gonna load these beans into my pressure cooker now and cook them on high pressure for 25 minutes. Of course, canned beans are totally usable, but cooking our own is gonna give us a texture and creaminess that I think is essential for great chili. Speaking of chilies, I've got 3 types of dried ones here for the base of this thing. I've got 20 grams of ancho chilies for their smokiness, 20 grams of guajillo chilies for their fruitiness, and 20 grams of pasilla chilies for their dark, raisiny sweetness. I'm gonna load these chilies into a 450-degree oven and toast them for 5 to 10 minutes. These are gonna be a huge part of making a grown-up style chili. Roasting them in the oven is gonna open up their flavor and make them easier to break down into a sauce. While the beans are cooking and my chilies are toasting, now I've gotta get the meat part of this thing sorted out. For that, I've got 2 pounds of boneless short ribs here. Look at these things. They're fully marbled. They're just loaded with beef fat flavor. And all we're trying to do here is make a dope beef chili, you guys. And for me, that means using the beefiest tasting beef, and short rib for me is where it's at. I'm gonna cut these short ribs into 1 to 2 inch chunks and lay them out on the sheet tray just like this. We're gonna be grinding this in a second, and to make sure we don't have smeared beef fat and mushy meat, we gotta keep it cold. So into the freezer that goes for 10 to 15 minutes. I'm gonna check back on my chilies at this point, and they're nice and toasty. They smell fruity and kind of hot, and they've gotten all puffed up. I'm gonna grab my blender jar now and start crunching these chilies open to remove the seeds. We want all that aromatic, pungent chili flavor, but we need to control the heat on them, so I'm going to be removing about 95% of those seeds. We're going to add some more heat ourselves later on in the form of chili flakes and hot sauce to keep that heat under control. Once these are all de-seeded, we're going to cover them with 600 grams of store-bought beef stock and spin them up into a puree. You're probably wondering, hey Bri, is it really worth it to grind your own beef, cook your own beans, and make all this chili paste? And I think the answer to that is yes. All of these details add up to a special occasion chili, something that can win a competition. But that being said, I have a simpler version of this chili down below in the description. It has similar flavor, but it'll be less work. It'll be kind of like a Cliff's Notes version of this chili. Okay, after this is spun up, now we're gonna give it a taste. And woo! This paste is super flavorful, it's pungent, it's fruity, and it's kind of hot. We're gonna throw this chili base now into a quart, and then we're gonna throw it into the fridge until we need it. Next, we're gonna grab the food processor, and then we're gonna grab the beef out of the freezer. It's been 10 minutes now, and we have firm, frosty chunks of short ribs that are ready to chop. I'm gonna process this meat in 2 batches so that things break down as quickly as possible. A few pulses here to start, and then a long one, and there we go. Now we got our custom ground beef, and all we had to do was take cold meat and put it in the food chopper for about 15 seconds. I'm gonna load the other half in now and repeat that same move real quick, and then we're gonna flip it out onto that same sheet tray. I've left my oven rolling from the chilies, and now we're gonna steal a move from the bolognese video and turn this ground meat into a sheet. I'm gonna give it a hot roast under the broiler. Once I load it, I'm gonna turn that broiler on to high to really get as much caramelization as we can as quickly as possible. This is just a more hands-off way of getting crumbly browned beef, and in large batches, I really dig it. While that beef roasts, we're gonna check on our beans. It's been 50 minutes total. That's 25 minutes under pressure and 25 minutes for that pressure to release, and they look pretty great. They're firm, but tender and very, very creamy. I'm gonna set that aside to cool down for now. Make sure to hold on to that bean liquid, and then we're gonna get back to the beef. Wow, I mean, that's a really quick 4 minutes under the broiler, and we've already got really well browned ground short rib.
That smells mega beefy.
Beefy, beefy, oh yes. Beefy. Yeah, dude, it's a beef bomb. I mean, it smells amazing. Next, I'm gonna go in hands first to smash all this beef up and crumble it. I wanna call out here that grinding the short ribs like we did leaves a nice variation in particle size as well. I like to have some more chunky, rustic pieces of short rib in the chili, and after this thing's cooked, it's gonna be almost like a little piece of stew that pops out every now and again, just hanging out in there. It's gonna be really dope. Once all that meat's crumbled up, we're gonna let it hang out for a second while we start to cook the base of this chili. For that, I've got a red onion here, 1 medium diced, 1 poblano, also medium diced, and 4 to 5 garlics that I've roughly chopped. I'm gonna preheat a large heavy bottom pot now over medium high heat. And shout out to my Aunt Karen who sent me this new Le Creuset Rondeau for my birthday. This is its maiden voyage, and you guys are here for it. We're gonna share in this special experience. Okay, to cook this thing now, we're gonna glug in about 3 tablespoons of olive oil, followed by the onion, and then the poblano. I'm gonna stir that up a bit, and we're gonna season that with a generous pinch of salt to draw out the moisture. I'm gonna saute that for a minute or two to soften it up. And I'll mention now, the tomato base of this chili is twofold. I've got 2 cans open behind me. One is a 28-ounce can of crushies, and the other is a 28-ounce can of diced tomato where I've drained off all the liquid. Back in my pot, once the onion and poblano are softened and starting to brown, in go my garlics, followed by 2 grams of chili flake, 20 grams of chili powder. We're doing paste and powder here because the powder fried up in the oil and aromatics is gonna give us a whole nother vibe here. Next is 20 grams of paprika, 12 grams of cumin, and 10 grams of cocoa powder. We're gonna stir that up to combine, let it fry off and bloom out for about 2 minutes. Oh yeah, doubling back. So cocoa powder seems pretty crazy, right? Well, chocolate and chilies are kind of like a peanut butter and jelly situation. A little unsweetened cocoa powder gives us a really big depth of flavor, more mystery, and it kind of takes this dish into that almost American mole direction. I've never really tasted it by itself though, so let's try some. Next, I'm gonna deglaze the fried spices and aromatics here with a quick splash of beef stock. This is gonna help get all those brown bits off the bottom and make sure that we don't burn. Oh my, that is quite glossy. Look at that. The next thing in is gonna be my 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes, followed by the diced tomatoes, about 500 grams of those total, and the chili puree we made earlier. I'm gonna stir all that up to combine, and now is really when you start to see the comparison to mole. It's chocolatey, it's deep, it's red, it's brown, it's purple, it's everything all at once. Next in is gonna be all that browned and crumbled short rib. I'm gonna stir all that in, and now it's really starting to look like chili. You can see the variation in texture here between the diced tomatoes, those chunky vegetables, and the nice crumbled short rib. I'm gonna throw the lid on this pot and then throw it into a preheated 275-degree oven and slowly cook for 1.5 hours. So while that cooks, we gotta decide what we're gonna do with our garnishes. There's a lot of varying opinions out there in terms of what goes on top of this thing. I did an Instagram poll a few weeks ago and it turns out that some of you guys don't put anything on top of your chili. I find that very interesting and kind of psychotic. For me, I gotta have cheese, sour cream, a bunch of oniony stuff on there, and something crispy like a tortilla chip or an oyster cracker. So while we pass the time for this chili to cook in the oven, we gotta get into the garnishes. First things first, we're gonna make some corn tortilla chips. To do that, I'm gonna take 5 to 6 tortillas and I'm gonna cut them into 16ths like this. From there, I'm gonna fluff them up and then drop them into preheated 350-degree fryer oil and stir them constantly. Once they're all puffed up, they're lightly golden and they're crisp, I'm gonna flip them into a paper towel lined bowl, give them a toss with some salt, and then finally we're gonna set them over into a fresh towel in a bowl to cool off. The other essential toppings for me are aged cheddar. I've got a brick here of white stuff. I'm grating about 2 cups on the largest holes of my box grater, and I gotta have green onions as well. For these, I'm just gonna run my knife through them. I've got 5 or 6 on this cutting board, and I'm cutting them on a bias to get some nice thin slices. I'll also definitely have a dollop of sour cream at the ready, but you guys already know what that looks like. All right, checking back on the chili 90 minutes later, it looks and smells so sick. It's dark and stewy looking, and the beef is really starting to get tender now. That's a huge deal here. I wanna call that out. Most chilies out there never get cooked long enough and the beef doesn't break down, doesn't get tender, and this is a huge misstep in my opinion. You have to have luxurious, tender, soft beef that's well broken down in your chili. Now we're gonna season this up a little bit before we finish it off. So we're gonna add in 30 grams of brown sugar, 20 grams of hot sauce, 20 grams of Worcestershire, 40 grams of cider vinegar, 15 grams of salt. It may need more, we'll get back to that later, and all of our cooked beans. That's about 850 grams of cooked beans total, and then about 150 grams of that bean liquor. The weird viscosity of this stuff is gonna bring some additional body to this chili that I really like. I'm gonna gently stir that up now, and be careful, the beans can be fragile, don't mash them up too much, and then load it back in the oven, this time at 325 degrees to cook lid off for 45 more minutes. During that time, the dry heat in the oven is gonna caramelize and reduce this chili. Doing this in the oven is a win-win for me. We get more flavor for way less attention. We don't need to stand over the stovetop constantly stirring. After 45 minutes, oh my gosh. It's time to pull this thing out of the oven and just look at it. It's full of dark, smoky mystery. It's thick, but not gloppy, and the short ribs are fully tender now. They've made this thing kind of glossy. All that's left to do now is have your number one girl give it a taste. And she digs it. I was slightly conservative in the brown sugar, the salt, and the acidity with the vinegar earlier, and I wanted to give you guys a little room to take that seasoning the last mile. It's really important to taste this stuff and adjust it as you see fit. It's gonna make a good chili great. So I'm gonna add a little bit more salt, a little bit more acid here from the vinegar, and a little more sweetness from the brown sugar, and oh yeah, a little bit more hot sauce. Okay, I think it's dialed. Lauren digs it. I like it. Let's eat this thing. Before I get out of here, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who supports this channel on Ko-fi. Your tips there go directly into the R&D for these videos and give me the ability to make chili 3 or 4 times before I film it. I've got a freezer full of chili, so thank you guys so much. As always, thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for sticking around. We'll see you next time.